Hello and welcome to another edition of the Philly Sports Reports pregame show. This time we have our 1-0 Philadelphia Eagles going into Kansas City for a Super Bowl 59 rematch with the 0-1 Kansas City Chiefs. I am Sam Heine. I am joined here by Matt Brown. Matt, how are we feeling today?
Sam, I am feeling really, really good about today. I am super excited to get this game underway. Week 2 of the NFL season is upon us. It's been a great day of football so far, and it's going to get even better. The Eagles are back, and they have an old friend. I shouldn't even say friend, an old enemy that they got to take care of business once again today.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Normally when you play a team so many times like the Eagles do, it's normally a division rival, but we're starting to get ourselves an AFC rival over there in the AFC West with Kansas City. And that is a good segue into our first topic today, that this is the 5th matchup between the two teams in the last 5 seasons. Obviously, Jalen Hurts and Patrick Mahomes have been at the helm for all of those matchups. In 2021, Jalen Hurts threw for a career-best 387 yards and 2 touchdowns against Kansas City, while Mahomes threw for 278 yards, 5 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Kansas City got the better of the Eagles that day, scoring 42 points. And then obviously they met in Super Bowl 57. Hurts played really great in that game, as we all remember. Mahomes struggled in the first half, came back in the second half with 182 yards total for the game, 3 touchdowns, questionable call at the end, and we don't have to spend too much time on that game. We all know how that one ended, unfortunately for us. But then the Eagles went back in the last Super Bowl rematch that they had in 2023 in Arrowhead, just like today's game will be in Arrowhead. Jalen Hurts only had 150 yards passing, but does what he does best and finds a way to win the game. Mahomes had 177 yards that game, 2 touchdowns, and a pick. I remember it was really rainy and really windy. It was just kind of a really gross game, that game, which is a possibility for today. And the Eagles came away with the win. And then we all remember their latest matchup, 2025, Super Bowl 59. Eagles obviously demolished the Chiefs in that game with a huge performance. Jalen Hurts threw for 221 yards. Mahomes, obviously, we all know, struggled, had the interceptions that he threw to Zach Bond and Cooper DeJean. And, so those are the last matchups that we've seen throughout the last couple of years here with the Eagles and the Chiefs. Like we said, they're almost becoming rivals, or I shouldn't say almost, they have become rivals over these last couple of years. And it's not all the time that you have an AFC rival, but it seems like we have one. And, do you think with the way that the last 2 games have gone, and then obviously the way that the Eagles dominated them in the Super Bowl, do you think it's going to give the Chiefs any extra source of motivation today, or do you think it's just going to kind of be, business as is?
I do think it is going to be business as is, but this team, they know what's up with the Eagles coming in, especially after what happened back in February. I mean, that was one of, in my opinion, the worst beat downs in a Super Bowl since the Denver Broncos Super Bowl with Seattle Seahawks, when it was 43-8 and the first snap went over Peyton Manning's head. I'll never forget that Super Bowl. A lot of people don't, because of how terrible it was. But that was the last time that there was truly a slaughtering in the Super Bowl. And while the end score was 40-22, it was 40-6. We all know what the final score really was in that game. But Kansas City's definitely pissed off about that last game, especially. And while they want revenge, obviously, it's a long season, until either team can get to the playoffs, get back to the Super Bowl. Kansas City not only has the motivation for that, but they're going to go for a thing that they have never done under Patrick Mahomes, and that's those 3 games in a row with Patrick Mahomes starting at quarterback. They've only lost back-to-back games, I believe, 3 or 4 times, something like that, and this will be the first ever 3-game losing streak, playoffs and regular season, if the Eagles end up picking the for the rest of today's game and going forward the rest of the year.
Yeah, I agree with you. I do think that the Chiefs, will obviously have an extra source of motivation from the Super Bowl. I mean, anytime you get demolished like that in the Super Bowl, or even just lose the Super Bowl, I think that was something coming off the 2022 Super Bowl. The Eagles wanted to go out there, and I think, obviously it's a little bit different because that game was closer and showed that they should have won that game. But I think that was a motivation point for them going in 2023, and obviously the Eagles ended up winning that game. But I agree with you. I think the biggest source of motivation for the Chiefs today isn't the fact that the Eagles kicked their butts in the Super Bowl last year. It's the fact that they're on the verge of going 0-2. And, teams since 1990, only 11% of teams that start 0-2 make the playoffs since the NFL went to that 17-game format in 1990, obviously now with the extra game here. But I'm not saying the Chiefs can't make the playoffs. Obviously, anytime they have Patrick Mahomes, anytime they have Andy Reid, if they start 0-2, they can definitely be one of that 11% that makes the playoffs. But, it's a big hole. It's a really big hole to start out. Obviously, it looks like the way that the Chargers played them in week one, it looks like they're going to be tough for their division. So starting out an 0-2 hole is something that the Chiefs are really going to want to avoid. And I do think that that's going to be their biggest motivation factor today. Something new on the show that we're doing
100%.
this year. So something new on the show that we're doing this year, for those of you who have watched the last couple of years with Ben and I, we're doing something new this year. We're doing a trivia question, just like the Phillies. They love to do the Stump the Fans. We're going to try to stump the fans today. So I'm going to ask the trivia question, and then for those of you watching, you can leave a comment for the answer, and then we'll see if anyone got the answer right at the end of the show. So the trivia question today is, when was the last time two quarterbacks faced off in the regular season after winning a Super Bowl against each other? Obviously, Jalen Hurts and Patrick Mahomes have both faced each other now twice in the Super Bowl, 1-1 record for both of them. So it's obviously something that doesn't happen very often. Matt, I'll let you think on that one, and we'll get your answer along with the people out there at home watching towards the end of the show. So now we're going to bring it back a little bit to last week. None of us have had a chance to really talk about the Eagles win last week, and obviously the biggest part of the win started before the game even really started with Jalen Carter. For those who don't know, Jalen Carter is available to play today. It is yet to be known whether or not the Eagles will take any disciplinary actions towards him. They did in the past, I believe it was last year, bench him for a drive or two for being late to some team meetings. So Nick Sirianni has kept it very in-house about what the team will be doing to discipline him. So it is not known yet whether he will be out there with the starters to start the game, but he is available to play. So for his spitting incident on Dak Prescott last week, he was fined $57,222. The NFL has treated him getting removed from the game early, his ejection, as his one-game suspension. And for those of you at home who are thinking, wow, $57,222, that's a really random number. That is one game check, so he will not be getting his game check for this game. Obviously, it was a very idiotic, stupid, disgusting move. I'm sure, obviously it's been talked about all week that he did, but it's definitely good that the Eagles will have him back on the field this week.
No, 100%, Sam. Losing, you can honestly tell very early on in that Dallas game, not only because of the momentum that Dallas got from us losing Carter, but the fact that the Eagles just had a whole part of their defensive game plan just thrown out the window because 6 seconds into the game, Jalen Carter decided to spit on Dak Prescott and get ejected, which, again, like you said, is one of the stupidest things you probably have ever seen on a football game. But this is a really big thing for the Eagles today, that he didn't get suspended, that he's going to be back out there today, back at practice, making good plays with his boys at practice. Because one of the big reasons, in my opinion, why the Eagles ended up winning the Super Bowl was because of the defense. Pat Mahomes, make him uncomfortable with only a four-man rush and the secondary to step up the way they did. And a big reason because of that was because of the Chiefs wanting to double team Jalen Carter and to make it so that other guys had to make plays. And in that Super Bowl, guys who aren't on the team anymore, Milton Williams, Josh Sweat, they were some of the big plays for the Eagles, and it really wasn't Carter. And that was because Carter was meanwhile getting double teamed because of how great he is. So either having Carter on the field is so big because you need him to take the double teams, or you need him to be Jalen Carter, top 30 player in the NFL that he is, and start creating havoc on the defensive side. So it's a really big thing for him to be back on this field today, and I'm excited to finally get to see 2025 Jalen Carter, other than the 6 seconds we got last week.
Yeah, 100%. I think you said it there with the double teams. I mean, you could just see last week the Eagles really struggled to get to Dak Prescott. One of the biggest things, you said it, is that he's going to be taking up those double teams, so it allows those other guys to be one-on-one. And I mean, let's face it, the Eagles' defensive line outside of Jalen Carter is probably the weakest unit on the team, and we kind of all knew that going into the season. And how he made the move this week with bringing in Zadarius Smith, and we'll see how he's able to contribute. But a lot was put on Jalen Carter's shoulders this season of being the one to carry the defensive line. We saw it so many times over the years with Fletcher Cox, where these guys were able to just eat on the outside, and the guys next to him would be able to eat. I mean, and you said it, losing a couple of those, guys who had really big impact last year, Milton Williams, Josh Sweat. We need these younger guys of Jalix Hunt and Nolan Smith and, Josh Uche now. These guys to really step up, and it's a lot harder for them if they don't have that big guy in the middle taking up all those blocks. So it's definitely a good thing for the Eagles to get him back today, and especially against the Chiefs offensive line that really struggled in the Super Bowl and really struggled last week. So it's definitely an area where the Eagles can take advantage today, as long as Jalen Carter is not is keeping his head on straight.
Yeah.
Another big topic last week was talking about A.J. Brown, the passing game, Devontae Smith. The Eagles really struggled in the passing game last week. Going into the half, they only had 30 yards of passing in the air. They had that long completion to Goddard, but that was the only throw that they had over 10 yards. And, a lot was made about A.J. Brown not getting any targets until the fourth quarter. And I think, something that was a little bit under-talked about was the fact that Devontae Smith didn't have any targets really either. He only had 3 catches for 19 yards. Just, Dallas Goedert did a great job last week in the passing game. But besides that, there just really wasn't a lot going on in the passing game. So we have a little bit of a video here from A.J. Brown talking about with Jordan Schultz about his targets last week. So we're going to play that, and then we'll go and we'll talk about it.
You had 1 catch, but I still thought you had a good game. They just game planned to completely take you out of the game.
Yeah.
You blocked your ass off. You were involved. It looked to me like your body language was awesome. You didn't have any issues. So how does that impact you when statistically you're not doing a lot, but you still feel like you're in the game?
I know I'm in the game because, the coverage is getting rotated to me every single play, and even if it's underneath a catch to Dallas Goedert or Johan getting his one-on-one opportunity, he making the big grab on the post, that's how I know I'm still in this game and in this game, and I'm still affecting this game. So regardless of if I was touching the ball or not, I'm still making an impact on the game. But as a receiver, it is tough because you want to touch the ball, you want to feel like you're contributing, and so. But yeah, that was tough. But I try to do a really good job of staying locked in and staying ready. I've seen a lot of stuff on the internet. Had zero separation and
all
I'm
that
hurt. I'm a
bullshit.
decoy.
We don't need
all that. And which is crazy because none of those things were true. I got zoned the entire game. I didn't get not one single man rep. So obviously there won't be any separation, and I'm not hurt and I wasn't a decoy. Just kind of how the game went. So I just know I'm excited for week 2.
So that is from the Schultz Report, Jordan Schultz's podcast. So, Matt, what are your thoughts about what AJ said there with Jordan Schultz?
So 2 things about that, really. The first thing being, old former me would have been really nervous about AJ Brown not getting any receptions prior to, before we won the Super Bowl last year. Me old would be like, oh my God, AJ just didn't get any targets. He's gonna hate Jalen Hurts, blah 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 blah, and everything's gonna be blown out of proportion. But he has really realized how important he is to the team and how much winning means to this team and how great this team is and how great this team can be. So it really feels good to see that AJ knows that he just isn't getting receptions from 1 week, and because they're really just taking him out of the game plan, and that's okay. They just are focused on winning the next game, doing whatever they have to do, and that's a really good thing to see because you hate to have the diva wide receivers that need to have their targets every single. I'm glad that's the first thing, and then the second thing with that is I'm glad that he is saying that he's ready for week 2. He knows he's hungry, and he knows that he's going to have a good game today, and I truly believe that's going to be the case. The last time he played this Chiefs team, he was going off in the Super Bowl. Nobody could guard him in that Super Bowl. Nobody could guard him really any of the times they played the Chiefs. The Super Bowl 57 before, he was dominating the Chiefs corners the entire game. The game in Arrowhead a couple years ago, he was doing great as well. So to me, that is really good to know that he is ready to go, and he feels that as long as he doesn't get this zone stuff going at him, if he sits some man-to-man coverage, he's going to take advantage of it and probably have a good day.
Yeah, I agree with you about what you said. I really appreciate AJ Brown for that answer because, like you said, there are so many diva wide receivers in the NFL who would be very public about their reaction to not getting the ball. I mean, just look right up the road in New York last week. It's week 1 of Malik Neighbor's second year in the NFL, and he's crying on the sidelines about not getting the ball, and then obviously gets it later and has some drops. So there's definitely a lot of people who would not go out and give that answer. So I really do appreciate AJ for that answer. I'm going to be a little bit on the other side of you, and I think that if the Eagles don't, if AJ Brown keeps seeing that there's opportunities and other wide receivers are having kind of like better years than he does, just because he is in this type of offense, I'm always going to be a little bit worried that he's going to want to, find another place, especially because he does have the Super Bowl championship ring already. But I don't think that's anytime soon. I don't know. Just the report yesterday, I think, is kind of brought that up back to me. And if people out there don't know what I'm talking about, there was a report that teams were trying to trade for AJ Brown in the offseason, and of course the Eagles said absolutely hell no. But it's always going to be in the back of your mind, and when there's games like this or seasons where AJ Brown isn't as featured as he should be, that's always going to be in the back of your head. But no, I really appreciate what AJ said there. I do think that Nick Sirianni, I think that you can tie that directly back to him. I think he does such a good job of getting everyone to buy into, the team over the individual. And that's such a core value of his, is that, you play for the name on the front, not the name on the back. And that's a big reason why I think this team won the Super Bowl last year. And, I really, like I said, I just really appreciate AJ for that answer, and taking, even if some people want to believe that he's not being truthful, at least he's taking the high road, which I do believe that he's being truthful, by the way, but he's taking the high road in the media. But yeah, so what do you think is going to be in store for the passing game today? Obviously it struggled last week. How do you think the Eagles are going to do in the passing game today?
I think it's going to be a good day for the passing, better day, I should say. I don't want to assume good, but I think it's going to be better than how it was looking last week against Dallas. We've seen, like I mentioned before, we've seen us kind of dominate this Chiefs defense, and we just saw last week how great Justin Herbert was last week for the Chargers down in Brazil. They were dominating while Xavier Worthy did get hurt, and we'll talk about him in a little bit. And they're also down Rashee Rice as well with the suspension. They are down their number 1 and number 2 wide receivers. They really just couldn't create any separation. And Mahomes is known to get his guys open from time to time. Even couldn't really get anything to go into Kelsey. Really had that one big pass. Other than that, he really only had like 2 small catches that weren't that much. So it was really nice to see that the Eagles, or it's really nice to see from the Chiefs that they're still struggling in that secondary, and it's going to be they're going to have their hands full today. Jahan Dotson had a really good week 1. He looked really good in the preseason. He's turning into something that you could hope to be a solid wide receiver 3 option, maybe even, be a sneaky wide receiver 2. You never know. But the Eagles have the pass catchers to be able to take advantage of the Chiefs secondary. And another guy that's not going to be there today, Dallas Goedert, out with the knee injury. We're not going to be able to check down with the tight ends today. So that's going to be a big issue for Hurt. So he's going to have to go to AJ Brown and Devontae Smith. Even if they're sometimes not open, he might have to force some balls that he doesn't like to throw all the time, because he's not going to have his full squad out there today, but he should be able to have enough guys, and with what they're getting from the secondary in Kansas City, should be able to take advantage of it.
Yeah, I agree. I think, just history should repeat itself with the way that the Eagles passed the ball against Kansas City. I think that 2023 game, due to the conditions, I think you can kind of, make excuses for that one of why the passing game wasn't great. But even in that game, they made some big plays. There was that huge pass to Devontae that basically won them the game. I'm somebody who's, I'm very skeptical of the passing game. Obviously, we saw what it can be like last year in the Super Bowl and in the NFC Championship game, but also we saw last year how it can be extremely inconsistent. And I think that throughout this year it might be inconsistent again, but I don't think that this is going to be one of those games. The way that it looked last week, they're going to try to force AJ Brown the ball early and often. Everybody knows that. But, I think something that can be really big is just taking advantage of the other things that the Chiefs don't have on defense. Trent McDuffie's probably going to travel with AJ all game long, so that should open up Devontae. And like you said, Dotson, all the reports coming out of camp were that he was having a really good training camp. And I think something that was kind of forgotten last year is that he was traded for like right before the regular season started. So it's kind of hard to get integrated into an offense right away like that. And I mean, he played his best in the playoffs, so that makes a lot of sense for getting the offense down. So yeah, while as a whole, I'm skeptical in the passing game just because we've seen it be so up and down, up and down, up and down for almost 2 years now. Just going onto year 3 with the passing game being up and down. I do think today is going to be one of those games where it's going to be up. We talked about it a little bit, but in week 1, the Chiefs did struggle against the Los Angeles Chargers, and for the first 2 games since the Chiefs have not lost their first 2 games since Andy Reid's second season in Kansas City in 2014, when they lost their home opener to Tennessee, and then Peyton Manning and the Broncos. That was the last time the Chiefs failed to make the playoffs. Something that's really interesting, obviously Andy Reid, the ex-Eagles coach, I think it's probably just because we've played them so often, it's not really a big thing that we're playing Andy Reid anymore, but I feel like, the first Super Bowl, obviously the first time we played the Chiefs when Andy was back, like it was just such a big deal that the Eagles are playing Andy Reid again. And then now I feel like no one's even talked about it at all this week. So I think it's interesting to take a look at Nick Sirianni versus Andy Reid's first 5 years as a head coach in the NFL. Obviously, a lot of people think of Andy Reid as the best coach in Eagles history, and obviously he's going to go down as one of the best coaches of all time. But I think it's kind of, I don't know if there's any doubters of Nick Sirianni after last year, but if there are any doubters of Nick Sirianni after last year, I think that these stats are going to be really good to hear for you. So Andy Reid versus Nick Sirianni's first 5 years as a head coach. Andy Reid was 51-29 with a playoff record of 1-3, while Nick Sirianni is 49-20, 6-3 in the playoffs, and 1 Super Bowl win with 2 NFC championships. It's pretty crazy to look at where Nick Sirianni has come from, being hired and kind of being looked at as like a joke hire. Everyone remembers his press conference. And then the first year, we're really struggling, getting the flowers thrown on him, to turning it around, to, losing the Super Bowl, to, everything that has really gone on. It's really interesting to just take a bird's eye view look at Nick's, record so far and see how accomplished he's been, especially, compared to Andy.
No, yeah, 100%. It's crazy that they've been this good it's crazy that Nick has been this good. And a big portion of that has been the veterans that he had that he was given when he first signed up for this job. The Lane Johnsons, the Brandon Grahams, the Fletcher Cox, the Jason Kelce of the world. They kind of made it really easy on him to way of life into the Eagles culture, and now he's this Eagles culture to one of the best in the NFL, if not the best. But yeah, this is a really tough game today, and in my opinion, it's tough because of Andy Reid. Andy Reid doesn't lose back-to-back games. Andy Reid doesn't lose often at all. Andy Reid doesn't lose when you give him 9 days of support. We talk about how rested we are with 10 days. I know they had to go to Brazil, Kansas City, but they got 9 days of rest from playing on that Friday, so they're just as rested for us. They have just as much time to game plan for this game. So I think Andy Reid has his hands full a little bit today, and I think a lot of today's game will be on Andy Reid to pick up that win, because I feel like if they don't win this game today, Kansas City, they're going to start pointing fingers at Andy Reid. Maybe is his magic up? It's a time for Kansas City to move on from Reid and give Mahomes a new coach that could help them into his second half, because it feels like Kansas City is at that point where if they start losing like this season, they may have to start retooling this team around Mahomes into his second half of his career. So this is a big start for Andy Reid if he doesn't want to start 0-2. And you brought up the percentage earlier about teams that don't make the playoffs or that make the playoffs that start 0-2. It's only like 11%. So a lot is on Andy Reid today to really get the guys that he has on his offense and defense.
Yeah, I think something that I'll agree with that you said is that, some people could start pointing the finger a little bit at Andy Reid, because I think he's starting to go a little bit down the same track that he went down here. Obviously 3 Super Bowls, been in all these Super Bowls. No, I don't think, me personally, I don't think his job's going to be on the line even if they miss the playoffs this year. But one thing that was a big thing with Andy here was that he became a little bit stubborn. He didn't want to run the ball. There was always those famous things about the run the ball Andy, and wouldn't get Donovan wide receivers, obviously went until T.O. And I think that's something that's kind of we're seeing in Kansas City now is their lack of I guess you could their lack of wide receiver depth. I mean, Rashid Rice is a decent player. Xavier Worthy, obviously, they took him with a high draft pick, and he's hurt. But they had Tyreek Hill. They traded him away. A lot of people think that they're going to go back after Tyreek Hill, but I think it's really interesting. And Kelsey, who knows where he's going to go after this year? I mean, personally, I think he'll probably retire after this year. I mean, with everything going on, he's talked about how he's been close to retirement in the past. So the weapons around Mahomes just are not the same as they were. And even with Worthy and Rashid Rice, they're not, one of the top duos in the NFL. And, that's something that I think that people could start pointing the finger at Andy Reid a little bit, is that, hey, in Philadelphia, you didn't really get top wide receivers for Donovan, and now you're not putting the equity into top receivers for Mahomes. So, it's definitely going to be a big advantage for the Eagles today, with obviously their receivers being out. But I think that that's definitely something to look for as the Chiefs go on, is that their weapons are really, really starting to diminish. And that kind of segues us right into our injury report for today. Only big injury news out of Kansas City, really, besides the Rashid Rice suspension, which obviously is not an injury, but he's going to be ineligible for today's game, is that wide receiver Xavier Worthy is out for today's game. That was announced a few days ago. For those who watched the Kansas City game versus the Chargers on last Friday, and for those who didn't, Xavier Worthy got ran into by Travis Kelce and dislocated his shoulder. And obviously, from the video, it looked pretty nasty. There was some talk about that Worthy was going to try to give it a go this week, but they ended up ruling him out. And then for the Eagles, tight end Dallas Goedert is out for today's game with a knee injury, and running back Will Shipley is out for today's game with a rib/oblique injury. Obviously, the Eagles traded for running back Tank Bigsby last week. A lot of people thought that this was a sign that Will Shipley was going to be out for a little while, and that has proven true so far. So just your thoughts on these injuries and how they're going to affect today's game.
No, yeah, they're big. The Xavier Worthy one is probably the biggest out of all those you said, and that's just because that just moves the third and fourth wide receivers up to first and second now on the Chiefs depth chart, which brings Juju Smith-Schuster and Hollywood Brown into even more prominent roles. So, not saying that the Eagles corners won't have an easy day, because they're NFL receivers. You can never take guys like that easy. And it's Patrick Mahomes you're playing. He'll get them open, but that's a big advantage for the Eagles. That's a big thing to not have to play Worthy and Rice this early in the season. On the flip side with things, you talked about Will Shipley. You got Tank Bigsby back there to help support that running back room. We're not going to see him for a couple months, looks like it. And Dallas Goedert, man, I'm back in March or April. I don't remember what month it was. I was doing a show with Ben for Philly Sports Hour, and he brought up the fact about Dallas Goedert and what the Eagles should do with him. And I said point blank there, I said, there's two things we need to do. Either you're going to let him ride this last year on his contract, and you're going to let him walk in free agency because you're not re-signing him most likely, and you're getting the draft pick, or you're going to trade him. And they didn't end up trading him. They ended up keeping him for the season. And if I said then, if they keep him for the season, I really hope he can stay healthy and have a great season, full 16, 15 game season, not miss much time with any types of injuries, because it feels like Dallas just misses games with injuries so often every year. And it's really frustrating because you invested I know it's been 8 years that he's been on this team, which is crazy to say that now. But you invested a big pick in him, a second-round pick, and it's not that he's been bad, but you really want your investments to pay off. You want him to be a guy that can help this team year after year. But it just feels like every year it gets to a point where Goddard's going to be out 3 to 4 games, and then he comes back for 6, and then he's going to be out for another 2. And it's really frustrating that the Eagles haven't had consistency at the tight end position for a pass catcher. And that's something that Hurts really needs, because he really, when he's getting flustered and he's getting blitz, he needs checkdowns, tight ends, and running backs. And we have a great one in Barkley. We know all that. But not that I don't love Grant Calcaterra. Love Grant. He's a great blocker, and he's a solid backup tight end to Goddard. But you losing Goddard every year has become a cycle, and it's really disappointing that at this point we don't know how long Dallas is going to be out. He could be out for a couple weeks. So who knows what Howie might do. Howie Rose might be making a trade for one of these tight ends that just isn't going to use, like a Tank Bigsby deal, and we could have a new starting tight end any time next week. But yeah, it's really going to be interesting to see how Hurts does in the short yardage if he needs to dump off the ball and he can't find Barkley or one of his receivers open.
Yeah, I'll start with Kansas City. You kind of said it there. Their wide receivers already are not great. So the fact that they have two of them out today is going to be a big thing. And, I think this is going to be a real test on Adoree Jackson. If he struggles today against these receivers, then I think you really have a problem because last week he did struggle. I'm not going to say he didn't struggle, but one of the things that I think people kind of just glossed over is that it is week one and that he was going against some of the best receiver duos in the league. CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens are not exactly the easiest wide receivers to cover. So I'm not going to give him a pass for last week, but I am just going to say, I think that we need to give him at least another week to see how it goes. But if he struggles today against Juju Smith-Schuster, Hollywood Brown, these kind of guys, you got to pull the plug. I mean, we're not in a situation where we can wait around and let these teams throw for all these yards on us because Quignon's over there locking his guy up, and the other side is just getting absolutely torched. And then to Goddard, yeah, I think, oh man, it's so tough because he is such a good player and he's been such a good player for this team, but he just cannot stay healthy. He's not. I think this is going to be his last year with the team. I think they're going to make a move this offseason to get a new tight end in here just because he has been so unreliable with the injuries. And I think the biggest spot that is going to hurt us today is actually going to be the running game. Grant Calcaterra is a terrible blocker. He's a really good receiver, but he is a terrible blocker. And, obviously Ben Van Sumeren being out, the idea for him was to be an extra blocker there as the fullback. So you're losing two really good blockers in this game today. So I really hope that the running game is still going to be able to work as well as it does. But last year we saw when Dallas Goedert was out, that Saquon didn't have as big of games. Last year Saquon was having big games every week, but didn't have as big of games. But I think that this is going to be a really good test for Jalen to be able to find his guys to be a safety valve because, like you said, last week Dallas Goedert was a safety valve, so now he's got to find a new guy to be a safety valve. So we got about 20 minutes till kickoff here, so we're going to keep it moving. We're going to move on to today's notable matchups for the game. Matt, I'm going to let you go first. What are some notable matchups you have for today's game?
So, notable matchup, you kind of just spoke about it, my number one, and that's the Eagles' run game. I'm really interested to see how it looks I was going to mention that, the no Goddard and no Van Sumeren as well. I'm really into because that was kind of the only thing back in the Super Bowl that really wasn't working. The only thing the Eagles couldn't do was effectively run the ball with Saquon Barkley. They could pass to AJ, Smitty, Dotson, Goddard. They could run on third down with Hurts. They could do Hurts design runs. The only thing they really couldn't get going was that Saquon Barkley only had 40 yards. I don't even think he had that many in the Super Bowl.
I think he got to 60, but yeah, he wasn't very effective.
Yeah, whatever it was, he wasn't that effective. And there were multiple times where Kansas City was stacking the box and they weren't letting Saquon beat him. So I'm interested if they do that strategy again. They force the Eagles to win through the air again, even though that didn't really work last time they tried that strategy. So I'm really interested to see that matchup today if Barkley can, get going, especially without the blocking that they're going to have. Van Sumeren, people don't realize how big of a loss that is really for them because that's so huge in that fullback, especially last year because they were using it all last year. And then notable matchup number two has to be Eagles pass rush. And I just don't know what it's going to look like. We talked about at the top of the show about how important Jalen Carter is and how important we need these younger guys to start taking the step up. Last time in the Super Bowl, all the guys that were making the big plays, Milton Williams, Josh Sweat, they're no longer here. It's time for the Nolan, and Nolan Smith was hurt in that game, so I won't give him that much. But it's time for the Nolan Smiths, the Mora Jomos. I'm blanking on some of the other names of our pass rushers. Oh my goodness. Uche, yeah. Even some of the D tackles, Gabe Halls and the Byron Youngs. It's time for them to take some steps, man. They need Jalen Carter, especially if Carter's getting double teamed. If Carter's getting double teamed all afternoon, somebody's got to be open to go get Mahomes. And I know Mahomes is dynamic and he breaks your heart on third down. Hurts does the same exact thing, but they dominated the Super Bowl for that reason because of the pass rush, and it needs to show up today if the Eagles want any chance of winning.
Yeah, I agree. So I have three notable matchups. I'm going to run through them pretty quickly. I have some player-on-player matchups that I'm going to be really looking at for today's game. First one for me is Chris Jones versus Tyler Steen. Tyler Steen obviously is the Eagles' new starting guard, replaces Mekhi Becton, third-round pick from a couple of years ago. And there's a lot of people out there who said Steen actually was one of the best of the offensive line who played last week. The Eagles' offensive line, I thought, struggled as a whole last week a little bit. While Jalen had a lot of time to throw, I didn't think that they did great in the run game, which is weird because normally the Eagles' offensive line is great in the run game and not great in the passing game. But Jalen had a ton of time to throw last week, so they did a decent job pass protect, but not a great job in the running game. So obviously Chris Jones is the Chiefs' second best player. He's a game wrecker. The Eagles did a great job against him in the Super Bowl. So he's definitely going to try to take advantage of Tyler Steen, and I'm sure Cam Jurgens is going to be helping out over there. So that's a big matchup to watch. Number 2 is Jalen Watson versus Devontae Smith. Obviously, we talked about earlier how A.J. Brown is probably going to be targeted early and often this week, but the Chiefs know that as well. The Chiefs know that A.J. only had one catch last week. The Chiefs know that the Eagles are going to try to get him involved early, and I think that could lead to a big game for Devontae Smith. Trent McDuffie, like I talked about before, he's a cornerback that's going to travel, so he's going to be going with A.J. wherever he is on the field, leaving Devontae Smith matched up with Jalen Watson. Devontae Smith has been a Chiefs killer in his career. In 4 games against the Chiefs, he has averaged 97.5 receiving yards per game. He had one game where he had 122 yards against them. Both Super Bowls, we obviously know he had really good games. And like we talked about earlier, he had that basically game-winning catch in 2023 when they played in Arrowhead. So I think, obviously they're going to try to get A.J. Brown the ball, but I think that Devontae Smith can really take advantage of his matchup today. And my last one, and the most important matchup of the game that I have, is Kevin Patullo versus Steve Spagnuolo. Steve Spagnuolo is obviously one of, if not the best defensive coordinator in the NFL. While that didn't exactly show last year in the Super Bowl against the Chiefs, he's well known to be one of the best defensive coordinators in the NFL. And he really can take advantage of the young and inexperienced play callers and offensive coordinators. I think it's very big that Kevin Patullo was on this staff last year when the Eagles picked apart Spags' defense, but that's a whole different thing than having to be the one who's calling the plays. I didn't think Patullo did necessarily a great job last week. I think that some people are giving him more credit for being bad than other people deserve, in my opinion, but that doesn't mean that I think he had a great game. So it's definitely going to be a big matchup to see if Patullo can put together a great game plan to beat Steve Spagnuolo. All right, so now we're going to move on to one of our favorite segments here, which is the SeatGeek Standout Stars. SeatGeek is the easiest and most efficient way to buy your tickets. Each seat is given a green, red, or yellow dot, indicating whether the ticket would be a good, bad, or fair deal. By using code Philly Sports Report, again, that is Philly Sports Report, you will save $20 on your first SeatGeek order. Click the link in the description or in our bio. Matt, who do you have for your SeatGeek Standout Stars today?
Number 1, I know it's easy, and I know you did talk about all that Devontae Smith stuff, and Devontae has been a killer, but I just think it's A.J. Brown's day, and I'll even talk about more when we get into other segments, but I think A.J. Brown is going to be the star player of the game today, whether they force it the Eagles or not. I think this is the type of game where A.J. just says, it's on me. I'm going to make sure that we end up winning this game and do everything possible. On the defensive side, real quick, my big star today, Jahad Campbell. It was the same one last week. I said it last week for the Dallas game on last week's pre-show, and he was a monster. I think Jahad Campbell, once again, has another great day and just continues to have his push for Rookie of the Year.
Yeah, so that's funny. So normally when I have a notable matchup and a player that I talk about a lot, I'm going to go for them for my SeatGeek Standout Star. So my first one is Devontae Smith. You said A.J. Brown. I'm going Devontae. I think that
That's fair.
I think he's going to continue that streak of really beating the Chiefs, and I just really think with McDuffie going to be following A.J. Brown, I just really think that he's going to have a good game today. But it's funny, I have the same second standout star with Jahad Campbell, and the reason I have Jahad Campbell, and I'm a big listener of 94 WIP, listen to it a lot when I'm at work. And Jason Kelsey, was on the morning show this week, and as he is every week during the football season, and he talked about who on the Eagles was best suited to stop his brother, Travis Kelsey. And he mentioned Jahad Campbell. Jahad Campbell had that huge pass breakup early in the game, I should say, on that deep pass where he was just running down the field with that wide receiver. And the fact that he can have that kind of speed to cover, it's a big ask. And I'm not saying that they're going to ask Jahad Campbell to cover Travis Kelce all the time, but I do think that he's athletic enough to at least be in the area of Kelce. And, with the wide receivers being out, it's not really something we've talked about yet, but I do think obviously they're going to, he's going to go back to old reliable of Travis Kelce with his weapons being out. So I do think that while I don't think John Campbell is obviously going to be covering Kelce all the time, it is going to be something that he's going to be in the area of, and I think that Jahad Campbell can make a big play this week. So thank you for SeatGeek for sponsoring that segment. Again, that is code Philly Sports Report, as you can see on the screen, for $20 off your first order. Now we're going to move into another segment here. We are going to have our locks of the game. So I checked this right before we went live, and the Eagles are still 1.5 point favorites in Arrowhead, and the over-under for the game is 46.5. Matt, how do you like that? How do you like that line? How do you like the over/under, and any prop bets that you're looking at today?
Yeah, the 1.5 basically makes it a pick 'em. So it's 1.5 and a half a point. They're almost basically the same. It's almost a pick 'em. I'm really liking.
One thing I will say, sorry to cut you off real quick.
No,
the one thing I will say is normally what they say is, a home team gets 2.5 to 3 points just for being home. So the Eagles are 1.5 point favorites in Arrowhead. That really means that they think that they're anywhere from 4 to 5 points better than the Chiefs.
Yeah, no, that's 100% how I feel with that, and I do think if the score ends like that, or that's how I feel like the score will end. I don't think it's going to be like a 1 point win, some game winner maybe, but I don't know. But in my opinion, I think you have to go with the 1.5 with the giving them to the Chiefs today, because I do think the Eagles are the better team. It wouldn't shock me at all if the Chiefs end up winning today. But on the other side with that, with the over/under, I do think that each team's probably going to score around 3 touchdowns, get some field goals, and that's going to put that over likely to hit. I know, of course, last week it was 47.5, and we did not hit we actually hit the under. I believe that was the first time that 2 teams combined for scores on their first 8 possessions of the game, and the under hit in NFL history, which is unbelievable that something like that happened. But I do think
the weather delay for that one.
Oh, probably, yeah. But I do think the over hits today. I do think we're going to see some touchdowns. We saw 62 points in the Super Bowl. I definitely think we're going to see some touchdowns from Kansas City, even with their offensive weapons out. But overall, I think they will hit that over today. I do think the Eagles will cover the 1.5 today and get the win. Spoiler alert for my pick 'em today, who I think is going to win. And I going the opposite of you. I think prop bets today. I think A.J. Brown is a really good bet for a touchdown today. I think they're going to force it to him and try to get him the ball as much as possible. And in terms of defensive bets, I think Jahad Campbell's getting his first sack today. So I don't know if that's a lock, but I do think Campbell gets his first sack today on a nice little linebacker pass rush. And that could be a nice little win if you were to go crazy and bet that. I wouldn't do that, but that's what I feel like is going to happen today.
I like it. So for me, 1.5, like you said, it's I'm going to top out a little bit. I wouldn't bet a 1.5 line just because it's like basically you might as well just pick who's going to win the game. But if I had to pick it, I would definitely pick the Eagles. I think going into Arrowhead, and I'll get more obviously on this when we do our predictions, but going into Arrowhead is obviously a really tough task. We talked about it so much about how the Chiefs kind of have their backs up against the wall a little bit here. But I think a very under talked about storyline is that the Chiefs are coming off of playing in Brazil. We saw last year that the Eagles lost coming out of Brazil. Obviously, they struggled in the beginning of the season anyway, but they did lose that game coming out of Brazil. The time change, the flights, all that kind of stuff. That they do have a little bit more extra time, obviously, to prepare, but I do think that that's something that could play a factor. And then over under 46.5, I have this game going barely over. Like you said, I do think there's going to be some points scored, and I have the Chiefs kind of getting a backdoor end of the game touchdown, trying to kind of make it a little bit closer than I think it's actually going to be. Prop bets, funny enough, I have A.J. Brown first touchdown. I think the first drive, they're really going to force it to him, and I think that A.J. Brown is a good luck for the first touchdown of the game. And I didn't really like a lot of the numbers that they set. Personally, Saquon was about what I thought he would be at. The other receiving yards were pretty much at where I thought it would be at, so I didn't really love a lot of those numbers. One thing I did like was Grant Calcaterra. Over/under was 21.5 receiving yards. That's basically 2 first downs. So I think that Grant could definitely get over that number today. We talked about how Jalen is missing a security blanket with Dallas Goedert. We have seen that Grant has been a little bit of a security blanket when he's been in there. Obviously, they are ex-college teammates of each other, Jalen and Grant. So I think that, over under 21.5 is a pretty good number for Grant Calcaterra. All right, so we're going to circle back to something we did in the beginning, like we said, talking about the trivia question. So I'll read the trivia question again, just so people can have that. So our trivia question of the day today was, when was the last time that two quarterbacks faced off in a regular season after winning a Super Bowl against each other? Matt, do you know the answer to this question?
I'm going to go with a trick question. I don't think it's ever happened.
And that is correct. So just so everybody knows, I did not put this question together. That is Ben, who normally is the host of our show. He put this question together. I wouldn't put a trick question out there. Nobody, unfortunately, in the comments got it correctly. That was a trick question. But yes, this is a trick question. This is the first time in NFL history that two quarterbacks who have won a Super Bowl against each other are matching up in the regular season. Pretty crazy that has never happened before, but there's not a lot of rematches in Super Bowls, so definitely kind of surprising. All right, so we are going to be moving on to one of our next and one of at least my favorite segments, and that is the FOCO Fit Check. FOCO, real fans need the best gear. That's why FOCO makes legendary gear for the most legendary fans. Click the link in the description. Excuse me, sorry, my read here. Click the link in the description. I guess that's it. Click the link in the description. So for me today, I normally go with a little bit of a theme for my outfits and hats and that kind of thing. So today I had to go, since we're playing the Chiefs and since we're having, the Super Bowl rematch, I had to go all Super Bowl gear today. So today we're going with the Super Bowl A.J. Brown jersey, obviously a new pickup, and then the Super Bowl champions hat. I heard that there's a lot of people who are in Kansas City that are rocking the Super Bowl gear, and I love that. So yeah, thank you to FOCO for sponsoring this segment. Definitely go check out the link in our bio, and you can get 10% off any FOCO purchase. All right, we are moving on to our last segment, is our keys to the game. We have just about 7 minutes to kick off, so we'll try to keep this one a little bit quick. But Matt, what are your keys to the game?
Score early, 100% the number one key to this game. You saw it in the Super Bowl. They got right away, and they got after them in the first half, and it was a huge thing. It basically sealed the game after the third quarter once they scored that Devontae touchdown. Number one key today. Number two, make Mahomes uncomfortable. And by doing that, I mean the 7 needs to get after him. Make him run out of the pocket. Don't let him sit back there and have all day. Make him uncomfortable back there and ruin his day, because that's how the Eagles are going to win this game if Mahomes just isn't playing good.
Yeah, two very similar keys to you. Get to Mahomes with 4. Biggest thing in the Super Bowl was that the Eagles did not blitz a single time, and they got to Mahomes all those times. I believe it was 6 sacks in the Super Bowl without blitzing. It was just amazing. The Eagles do, while obviously our second cornerback spot is a problem, the Eagles still do have some really good players back there in the secondary who can really cover. Cooper DeJean, Quinyon Mitchell, obviously, Reed Blankenship. These guys can really cover. So get to Mahomes with 4 and make him make mistakes. And then the second one is similar to yours as well. Get the passing game going early and often. I do think that Steve Spagnuolo's I think he's going to try to stop the run again today. While obviously he got burned by Jalen passing the ball in the Super Bowl, the Eagles' offense passing the ball is super inconsistent, and the most consistent thing about this team is their running game. I do think that he's going to focus on Saquon first and see if Jalen can beat him again with his arm. So let's see if he can do that and get the passing game going early and often. And I'll throw one more in there really quickly, since we have both basically the same. And this is a key to just about every game, but it's a key. It's the biggest key against the Chiefs, I think. And coming off of last week is, do not kill yourself. The Eagles last week, they held on to that game. A lot of it happened with CeeDee Lamb dropping the ball at the end of the game, but they just had so many self-inflicted wounds. Obviously, Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith, a ton of penalties. They didn't turn the ball over, which is great, But, if they do turn the ball over, that's obviously a self-inflicted wound. You have to play your cleanest game against the Chiefs to be able to beat them, especially at their place in Arrowhead. I'm not going to play conspiracy theorist here, but everyone knows what it's like playing in Arrowhead. There's going to be calls that go the Chiefs' way. It just is what it is. The Eagles need to play their cleanest game, no dumb mistakes, hold on to the football, win the turnover battle, and if they can do that, I think they'll come out of there with a win. It is prediction time, Matt. So what is your final score prediction for today's matchup?
I have the Eagles winning 30-24. I think Hurts, Saquon, and Brown get in the end zone today. I think Jake Elliott kicks a trio of field goals. I think for the Chiefs, I think Travis Kelce does find the end zone today. Pacheco another one, but otherwise, I don't think Mahomes is going to be able to do it. I think he throws a pick or two, maybe even a fumble. And I do think the defense for the Eagles steps up today, and they end up that's going to be the big thing, not letting the Chiefs get back in this game, and the Eagles win 30-24.
All right, I like it. I also have an Eagles win. I have them winning 28-21. I think that this game's going to be a little bit of a lower scoring game to start out. I think the Eagles could be up around 21-14, get the ball, 8 minutes left in the fourth quarter, take a long touchdown drive to go up 28-14. Chiefs go down, score a late touchdown. That doesn't really mean anything. But I do think that the Eagles are going to win this game. Like I said, I just think, there is a lot going against the Eagles today. The Chiefs obviously need this game more with the possibility of going to 0-2. It's in Arrowhead, which is obviously an extremely tough place to play. And anytime you're playing Patrick Mahomes and anytime you're playing Andy Reid, it's going to be a really tough game. But I just honestly think the Eagles have such a better roster than the Kansas City Chiefs from top to bottom. If you look at the Chiefs roster, they have a few guys that scare you: Mahomes, Kelce, Chris Jones, McDuffie, but their roster is really not that deep. Their D-line has struggled. Their O-line has really struggled. Their receivers are hurt. Obviously, we know that. Their secondary can be had. So I think that the Eagles are the better team, and I think they're going to show that today. And I think that we're going to leave Arrowhead 2-0. That is going to do it for our Eagles-Chiefs pregame show. Thank you for everyone who watched. Thank you for everyone who commented throughout the show. I'm sorry we had to wrap it up a little bit quickly there because we have kickoff coming up in just a few minutes. Definitely check us out. Check out Philly Sports Reports for .com for all the recaps and all the stuff going through the rest of the week. We will have somebody writing a post-game recap, and then we will have Ben's observations tomorrow. And tune in next week for our pregame show against the Rams. Thank you again for watching, and go Birds!
Go Birds, baby!